It's the transfer show here on the Blue Room. Hope everybody's doing well. Started a new week, new content on here for us. We're just saying then, I've got Rob Vera and Dave Downey with me. So has anyone got a particular favourite transfer rumour? And Dave just point blank made some up.
Well, yeah, because I thought I saw in my scouring of Everton news and social media, I just sort of glance at various things. I don't really pay too much attention unless something catches my eye, and that's normally a wrestling article or something like that. So, I was just, as you do, scrolling down Twitter, and I swear I saw Mario Götze or Marco Reus linked with us. Someone had actually done a mock-up of one of them in an Everton top. That's how strong the link was, Matt. And you completely dashed my dreams.
Yeah. Well, I typed Marco Reus into Google and Everton into Google, nothing came up. Götze and Everton, he was basically told that he's sort of so bad now that he needs to look at joining clubs like Everton or West Ham. That was the news. The news story that came up. He's gone from scoring the winning goal in the World Cup final, Rob, in 2014, to being told Everton and West Ham is your level, lad.
Jeez. I want you want to argue it because I know that we feel and I feel that we're not West Ham's a joke to us, but we probably are kind of lumped into that kind of middling group of below the competitive / elite group of Premier League clubs. So, I feel like we're always constant. I feel like we're always linked with the same players as West Ham in these throwaway articles. But I'm fully expecting, and I'm sure this is not an original thought, but I'm fully expecting now that Newcastle has all their, mega murderer money that they're getting from Saudi Arabia, that they're going to maybe replace us as the new Sheikh club to no pun intended there to be linked to every player just because they've got money, and so it'll be interesting to see what that turns out to be. But yeah, I mean that's sad when we're kind of viewed as and we've talked about that a lot, haven't we? Like, we've got to get out of that whole cycle of being the place that a good player who once was really good goes to kind of just collect the paycheck. So let's hope that we're not at that stage.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about one of them potentially later on. The main story of the last few days, one which Dave didn't make up, is Adrien Rabiot, who's had a bit of a torrid time at Juventus by virtue of the fact that he's a midfielder and he plays in Italy. Obviously, he's been linked with Everton, but the speculation's been a little bit stronger than some other players that would be linked to him over the last few days. So we'll have a chat about him. I'll also be quizzing the lads again, as we do on the transfer show at the end of the show, in regards to players who came in a particular summer. So we've got that to look forward to as well. Rob needs to improve after 2 poor showings over the last couple of weeks.
Hey, it was better last week, I'll just say, but.
In fairness, you had Mike helping you last week, who we discovered on Friday is Everton nerd number 1.
And listen, I came back like a phoenix from the flames. I was at the bottom after the first couple of categories, Matt. So I deserve some credit.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, where did you finish in the end? Joint third.
Joint third.
There we go. So we'll be asking the lads about that anyway later on. But we're going to start off with a question Rob asked me today, actually, and I'll read verbatim the message he sent to me earlier on. So he said, do any of us think that there's now more we can learn after the season restart than we didn't already know about the squad as it relates to transfer needs? So your question is, Rob, effectively, will playing these final 9 or 10 games reveal any sort of either chinks in Everton's armour or things that we've got which are really good, or sort of over the course of the next 10 games, will our transfer needs alter? Is that what you're sort of asking?
Yeah. So a few months ago on one of our pods, I brought up this same topic from the standpoint that, now I think at that point we were probably out of, trophy contention, and the season was just starting, and it may have been right before things ended and we'd started to kind of wobble a little bit. Maybe the new manager bounce is ending, whatever. But I remember at the time when the virus stuff first hit, I was kind of like, I'm at the point now where it almost doesn't matter, because I feel like anything that I need to learn about this squad, I've already learned. I don't think that there's anything new I can learn. Well, now fast forward a couple of months, it looks very much, barring some unforeseen huge spike, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility given how quickly things are reopening. You just never know how the virus will react. But it looks like we're going to definitely restart again. And so I kind of came back to this question of, is there anything – I think we all I have identified the positional and needs or the deficiencies in this squad. I don't know that there's anything more I have to learn over the next 9 or 10 games. You could probably stretch that a bit and say, well, it'd be nice to see Moise Kean get in and maybe score a few more goals to kind of solidify his place, in the squad next year as the primary sub off the bench, or guy who rotate starts in games up top, things like that. I mean, all kind of fringe issues here and there, but I don't know that there's anything that can happen in the next 9 or 10 matches, barring, and I hate even saying this, but barring a significant injury of some kind that could obviously alter our priorities in the window. I think that's what obviously, and that kind of brings me to the idea of what scares me most is that I don't know that I can learn anything. And the only thing new that would change any of our priorities in the summertime would be a significant injury. And then it just kind of reemphasizes to you how little Everton have to gain from these last 9 or 10 games. There's not really, I guess if we could hit the ground running, that there's still, we've even forgotten this, that there's still a chance of getting into Europe, I guess. But it's just like, I would be satisfied if you gave me right now that we would basically finish just about where we're at, and all of our significant players were healthy to end the season going into whatever this offseason is going to look like, whenever the new season is going to start. I would probably take that at this point. But I was wondering if you guys think that there's anything more, and maybe I'm just not thinking about it, that we can learn. I don't know that there's that I'm going to suddenly think we don't need a right back, addressed, or central midfielder to, or an attacking winger. I think these are all things that are pretty obvious.
I think that's a really interesting question, because you still have the ghosts of the season so far to haunt many players, I think, Rob, but also there's a chance for a blank slate for many of them as well, which I think if any of them have any intention of staying at this football club beyond whenever the next break is, where we're allowed to exchange players, then they have to book up their ideas in these 10 games. For many, it might be too late, of course, because I can't see a scenario where you're going to get a Gylfi Sigurdsson pulling up all the trees in the last 10 games and sort of changing everybody's mind, saying, oh yeah, we just had, he was just out of form for the first 2/3 of the season, and now he's all of a sudden come to life. That said, I mean, you have to sort of weigh that up against how hard these players are going to be to shift as well. So you might find yourself in a no-lose situation in that regard, because many who we've written off might all of a sudden look and think, well, maybe we can get some value out of them because they're going to have to stay anyway. I mean, there's no way we can get short of Gylfi Sigurdsson, I don't think, at all. I think he's here until maybe at least there's a year or 18 months left on his deal, and then he probably goes for a cut price for a fee or even a free transfer, given his age. That shows you the wisdom or lack of in his acquisition in the first place and the price of it. But then there's others I look at and I think, well, the people who are on sort of teeter on the edge of being neither here nor there in regards to our opinions of them. And I think, there's ones who you look at, Theo Walcott. I mean, you look at somebody like him who many people will write off and say, get shut if he possibly can. Well, we're not going to, because he's got no resale value for a start. And his season hasn't been as bad as many others, which, doesn't say much about either him or the others. Mm-hmm. But he can still prove to be effective, I think, because he's still got pace, and that's still somewhat of it's underrated for us, because we've never been blessed with pace traditionally, I don't think in the Premier League era, we can probably pinpoint players, one or two, in certain teams who've been quick, but we've never had an abundance of pace in our side at all. And he's one that does have that. So anytime he takes the field, I always think, okay, yeah, I'm always one of the first to perhaps write him off because he has been pretty useless since he signed from Arsenal. But maybe that pace can get you something. Look at the goal against Watford, for instance. There are very few players in our team who'd have the legs to get up the pitch at that stage of the game and be able to net that late winner. So I think there are a couple who maybe not, wholeheartedly change our minds on them, but I think there are ones that can maybe ease the sort of punishing judgment that's coming their way from many of our fan base, because I know I'm ready to bring down a whole world of hell on a number of these players. So there is an opportunity over 10 games for them to ease that pain, but not overwhelmingly so. So I think it's such an interesting question. There are plenty of nuances to it, Rob, but I can't see any of them who've shown us in the past that they're capable of changing our minds if we certainly do hold them in that sort of they're useless for us.
And I think what you just said there, Dave, in regards to you don't think there's many players who are capable of changing our minds. That's probably an indictment of the players we've brought in and the squad we've got. You don't look at any of them and really say, as much as you sort of look at them and go, they're playing to what we expect they are because they're just all right players. You wouldn't really look at any of them and go, well, they've got a ceiling to go higher if they do this, this and this. You sort of feel as though, well, they're playing that good because they are that good. There's no one underperforming or who's lacking focus or any of that kind of stuff. And I think with that in mind, you could probably put our squad into two brackets where you've got a group of players that have been here more than a year and everyone's pretty much... Maybe the goalkeeper aside, because I know people have divided opinion on Jordan Pickford. Maybe he's in his own group. But I think apart from him, any player that's been here for more than a year, we've had to look at, people have pretty much made their mind up and know what they're going to get from. Whereas you've got the players who have been here for less than a year, and you've got people like Alex Iwobi. I mean, what on earth does the future hold for him? It's no one's got a clue. You've got Moise Keane, who has been in and out of the side, big talented player, but we don't really know about him. Jean-Philippe Gbamin, obviously we don't know because the lads hardly kicked the ball for us. So I think we've got those categories really where you've got players who have sort of we don't know about, players who are sort of we know what we're going to get, but probably not going to get much better. And that doesn't really. You can look at players like Richarlison and Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Holgate and say, well, they're going to get better naturally because they're young. But you don't look at any others and go, well, he could potentially have a breakout season next year, or with a few little tweaks here and there or change position, he could go up another level. And I think that's not that exciting, really, is it? When you look at it like that.
Well, can I make a point about that? So we're living in a time, aren't we, where a lot of people talk about peaks and using all sorts of graphs in line with the coronavirus. Well, to borrow that sort of loose analogy for a second, how many of our players in that squad would you say are on an upward trajectory, on an upward peak, towards a peak, who haven't peaked yet? How many would you say are in that squad?
Is this players who are currently on an upward trajectory or who've got the potential to go up?
Both. Give me. I'll include both because I don't think there's that much of a difference between those two. I'd
say there's 3 players on an upward trajectory, on an actively upward.
Holgate, Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin. Yeah. Those 3. Now, you fit that in with what...
Keane, I'm sorry. Like, if we're going to have 2 years' worth of patience of Calvert-Lewin not scoring...
No.
You're going to give me Keane.
I'm not saying he can't get better, but is he getting better, Rob? Have you seen him get better this season at Everton?
Well, I mean, it's such a... It's just so... It feels like an apples and oranges comparison to a degree, because I don't know that you can look at any 19-year-old's first season in the top flight and really make a great assessment, given the fact that players like that naturally are going to be in and out of the side. But I'll grant you that. I think that Moise Keane is the most. I think he's incredibly talented, and I think that. By the way, in having this discussion, Dave, and this is the only point I was going to make, is that when you're classifying players and you're talking about where their arrow is pointed and all of these things, There is the role of the player in his own development, right? We talk a lot about guys like Calvert-Lewin, who we sometimes refer to as these self-made types, but
The Matt Jones made.
yeah, but for instance, Alex
Alex
Iwobi. So Alex Iwobi feels like he's been around forever, but he's 23 years old. So I put him in a different category than I would put, for instance, Bernard or Sigurdsson. Like the way I look at it is that when you have young players under a certain age that have demonstrable skills, that yes, it is on the player to improve, but it is also on the club as a developmental environment and atmosphere. The elite clubs are the ones that develop those types of talents to become better players.
But that's exactly what I'm about to say. So if we go those four, then if we include Keane, Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin, and Holgate, upward trajectory, yeah.
Yeah, I might throw Yerry Mina at being only 25.
Okay.
Yeah, I might throw him in there too.
Those five, then we have them loosely on that. How does that tally up with what Marcel Brands was charged with doing when he first come in 2 years ago? Because I don't think that's enough, and I think that in the disparity you'll see between what you would imagine Marcel Brands to have in terms of the number of players who are on that same trajectory as those five we've just mentioned, and what we've actually got in the reality, that is worlds apart, and that's the problem we've got. Because referring back to your initial question about in these 10 games we've got, can we have our minds change? Well, yes, of course we can, and it's a fact that we can have our minds change. But will we? We know the answer, and it's going to be no. And the fact we've got those five, it's a mark of how difficult his job is going to be in recruiting enough to get on that same level as those five. If they're all shooting upwards and everybody else is either plateauing, to be kind, or going like that. And that's the problem. We've got five players. You think you're in that far into a project. The Machiri one, which is a lot longer than Brands for a start. But let's not forget, Brands has spent a lot of money there. How many of those five are Brands signings?
So I mean
Richarlison,
Mina. Obviously, no. Keane was not. Keane was Keane. Oh yeah, Moise Keane was. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking of Michael Keane for a second. Well, and by the way, I would probably put, and this is again where these types of discussions can't be super black or white, because we talked about this extensively and all the extenuating circumstances. I still feel, and maybe I'm in the minority here, I still feel we have not seen the best of Andre Gomes yet for a variety of reasons. One of which, the fact that he's been surrounded by, a completely almost criminal lack of ability around him in midfield during his time at Everton. But also, as I've said before, I want to see him have an extended run under Carlo Ancelotti. I also take into account that he's coming back from a catastrophic injury almost miraculously in the same season. So I still feel like we probably, and we think of him as being older somehow, but I think Gomes is 25? 25?
He might be 26. Yeah.
But I mean, that's that's right at the beginning of prime years for those guys. I mean, I don't know. I think that there are certain players that we know. So, for instance, Gylfi Sigurdsson, nothing would surprise me more than him scoring a bunch of set-piece goals in front of empty stadiums when games don't matter at all. That just somehow...
That's classic Everton, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it just somehow would sum him up on some level for me, which is disappointing because I don't think he's a bad character or a bad guy. He just hasn't lived up to the hype or whatever. But, look, if Gylfi Sigurdsson was what he is now, exactly what he is now, but he was 23 years old, we're having a very different conversation. And I know we'll get to it here in a bit, Matt, but when you consider guys like, I'm going to butcher his name, Rabiot.
Yeah.
Rabiot? Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to really French that up. But, if you consider guys like him who are young but have been at multiple clubs, and you have to ask the question, why are guys this talented moved on this much? I think that the reason that they will always still get the benefit of the doubt is when you're under a certain age, the conversation is fundamentally different. And it is up to – so I look at a guy like Iwobi, even with his flaws, he still statistically is one of our best chance creators. He's 23, a Nigerian international. If we aren't the kind of club that can take a guy like that, who by all accounts is, a good dude, good in the dressing room, not a problem guy, has talent. If we can't take guys consistently like that and raise their game another level, then to me, that's an issue with the club. Yes, Marcel Brands is part of that, but it's an infrastructure thing overall. And if you look, Dave, you asked before, like, how many of Marcel Brands signings are on the upward trajectory? I think his batting average, like his overall average percentage, whatever you want to call it, is not bad. But I also think he's had 2 summer windows at this point. We've all addressed what we found wrong with the most recent window, when we felt like he didn't adequately address the center half position. Though, as we've said before, whether he meant to do that or not, we wouldn't be having a discussion like we have about Mason Holgate and Yerry Mina being on that list if Kurt Zuma had been re-signed. Yeah. We would probably be seeing a Zuma-Keane partnership. And now I think we've had the benefit of seeing Michael Keane for what he is. And we've had the benefit of, frankly, not overpaying over the mark for Kurt Zuma, I think has revealed better values in guys like Yerry Mina and Mason Holgate. But again, sometimes things work out the way they work, but I also do think that we probably need a little more time to adequately grade Marcel Brands on his job in regards to recruitment. But a big part of as much as this transfer show and the discussion is fueled by player acquisition and player movement, player development and how these players look year to year, especially the young ones, and how they are taking steps forward, ultimately has to be a big part of how we judge the tenure of guys like Marcel Brands.
And I suppose the other factor. So go on, Dave.
Sorry, mate. I just want to come back on that. There was for a long time, and this is a common theme amongst Evertonians, not least myself, because I do it all the time. I get carried away with when things happen, and Marcel Brands was one of those things. And as we know, it's a game of extremes, isn't it? When it comes to Everton, you're either a hero or a villain pretty quickly. And Marcel Brands was lauded as a hero very, very quickly for the players he brought in the initial. When we had a bit of a purple patch under Marco Silva, everything was going right. It felt like this guy couldn't put a foot wrong. But I'm starting to have a little bit of revisionism about Marcel Brands. Not to completely write him off as what some people have done in the mess that ended Marco Silva's tenure. But I feel as if his accountability has fallen by the wayside and sort of gone unnoticed quite some time. And I think Alex Iwobi is a big part of that. Rob's talking about him there in terms of, is it on the club to improve these players and the developmental issues that they've got? They either step up to the mark themselves with the help of the club, or the club either helps them do that, or they end up doing it themselves. Alex Iwobi's signing to me was indicative of a club that's still stuck in the ways that would have seen us sign some of the players we did under Steve Horse. Now, that might sound a bit extreme, but what I mean by that is he was a panic buy, because whatever it was we were in with Wilfred Zaha, Alex Iwobi was the alternative to him. And we decided to go and splash 30 million on him in the last minute of the transfer window. Now, look, if he'd have done the job that we have wanted him to do, if he'd have succeeded the way in which we wanted him to, I wouldn't be sat here saying, well, what was that purchase all about from Marcel Brands? That's fair. That's fickle nature of football. But when you look at it now, you think, what's really changed if we're doing that? If we're still going after players like him, who are fitting right in the middle of that bracket that Everton have become in recent years, and that is getting the castaways from sides that are a little bit better than us, that we're trying to become better than. How has our transfer policy changed if we're still doing things like that? Because Arsenal wouldn't have readily let him go. I don't care what reason was spouted about him wanting new challenges or whatever. And he wouldn't have intended to leave Arsenal. Matt, I go back to that golden saying that you always tell me there's a reason why some of these players end up with Everton. And to go back to the initial point at the start when I was talking about was it Gertrude or Royce? I forget again now. And you were saying that apparently he's being told he's only fit to play for Everton or West Ham. I'm going to say something many Blues won't like. Now, I don't think we're that far away from West Ham when you look at the way we are. I don't mean in terms of quality. I mean in the way in which we do business. Because West Ham are a mishmash of players that have shown it in fits and starts. They've had half-decent careers elsewhere, but ended up at West Ham. You think of Yarmolenko, you think of Jack Wilshere. You think of players like that ended up at West Ham. We're not too dissimilar to that. We're very much of that thread where the players we end up with in our squad are neither here nor there, really, are they? They've been at big clubs, and for whatever reason, they haven't done it at big clubs, but yet they've ended up at us. Ours are just better than West Ham's, but we still adopt that same philosophy. And I think it's until we get out of that circle of how we recruit players that we're still going to go on in roundabouts. Yes, Marcel Brands might be much better in recruiting different profile of players, in getting an Andre Gomez to us and getting a Luca Dean. But again, those players, albeit at a slightly higher level, have still got those same restrictions on them that you see at a club like West Ham. That's why our recruitment has to be different. And to play devil's advocate, I think Brands has got a lot to show us there.
Yeah, I think what I would say is I would have expected a little more, albeit it's still relatively... Well, saying that, it's 2 years, isn't it? Coming to 2 years, he's been at the football club now. So in that time, you would have expected a network to be established, a clear plan to be put in place by him as the director of football.
Well, you've just done an academy show, Matt. You've just done an academy show. That's another big part of this. You've just done that show.
That was the point I was going to make before.
Yeah,
like, in regards to having a squad that's all organically getting better, those lads coming through just under the surface and pushing for places is important as well. And we haven't had any since Tom Davis, really. You know, Anthony Gordon was on the bench for a bit last season, played in the second half against West Ham, obviously, but none of them have come through since Tom Davis, and that's an issue as well. And then also you've got to go out to the continent and buy some of the best young players, which we think we've been getting in the likes of Keane and Sandro, but to get players of that pedigree who are being linked with massive clubs as well, it costs money in terms of wages, it costs money in terms of the transfer fee. Then all of a sudden you've got a young player coming through the door who may not work out, and you're looking to ship them out, and you've got a situation like we've got with Sandro at the moment, where the lad's on 120 grand a week, and we just can't shift them. So it adds more risk. So I think the club have got to do things better organically. The academy's obviously a big one. The players that we signed as well have all been, maybe apart from Richarlison, albeit that was probably the biggest, the most money we spent under Brands, they've all been relatively well known and obvious as well. Now, you look back to last summer and you say, how many times did we see in reports from reliable journalists about how Everton are looking for a lad who's left-footed to play on the right-hand side, to cut in and give us that balance and let the full-back go beyond. And you look at Zaha and you think, yeah, there you go, he fits the bill. And albeit it was a massive amount of money, and albeit you look at our finances and think, thank God we didn't spend £80 million on him. You think, well, Alex Iwobi's not that type of player. You know, he's effectively a number 10, or a number 10 who tucks in from the left-hand side. Zaha is somebody who plays up front or plays on either flank, and he gets in behind and he stretches defence and he's pacey and skillful. And you sort of look at it and think, well, that doesn't make any sense, really. If you're planning for the summer to play a certain way, you bring in Alex Iwobi, who effectively is jostling for the same position as Bernard and the same position as Richarlison at the time, who's obviously playing on the left-hand side. And there's no strategy there in that regard as well. It felt like there was a breakdown. So fingers crossed that will be remedied going into this summer transfer window. And like we said, the one rumour that's been sort of doing the round over the last week or so, in fairness, was from quite a reliable source in L'Equipe, who reported that Everton, Adrien Rabiot was looking to join Everton. He wanted to join Everton to link up with Carlo Ancelotti. He's not been warned elsewhere like Goethe or Marco Royce. Maybe he's had someone who's here like those lads. But it feels like the classic player we've been linked with recently, Rob, since we got money, in regards to really talented, played at major clubs in the past, obviously Juventus and Paris Saint-Germain. He was on Man City's books as a youngster as well. But there's baggage there, there's issues there. It's not worked out for him elsewhere, and it's just, I just feel again, it's one of those where you look at it and go, albeit if you got it right with him, he could potentially go on to be a world-class midfielder. these lads just don't seem to come to come good at Everton. And even with Carlo Ancelotti here potentially providing that guidance and that leadership that could help a young player like that, it just doesn't feel like the right sort of move for me.
Oh, well, I think what's interesting is, based on this conversation that we're having and some of the things, Dave, that you were just talking about, like, if a guy like Rabiot had been at 2 or 3 prominent Premier League clubs and we were talking about getting him now, then everyone would be writing him off as this guy who's been failing downwards towards Everton. But he's coming from some big clubs in Europe. And so what direction does that go? Does that go in the Luca Dean direction, where Luca Dean came here and essentially, especially his first season, and the more I look at this season, as much as I feel underwhelmed, the numbers are still pretty decent, but I think the eyeball test for Luca Dean hadn't been as good. But that aside, look, this idea, I love the idea, guys, that we're only going to sign players who come from who have never failed and have only been awesome. But because of the market we play in, because of the fact that we are not in the Champions League, because of a variety of factors, we have to have sort of an all hands on deck approach, which says that yes, we want to sign young up and coming talents, your Moise Keanes, whatever, but we also are going to have to by our circumstances alone, take some flyers on players who we look at and say, look, they have not succeeded at one place or another, but I look at their talent, I look at their age profile, and I look at the fact that we say we have one of the best managers in football history. And I believe that we can get something more out of this player that he was not able to produce in other places. So that's the optimistic view of a guy like Rabiot, is that you say he's still young, he's talented, he's a year younger than Andre Gomes, but at that same time, he's 25, so he's not a baby. He's not I think once you're 25, you're not a young player anymore to me. You're right firmly in the middle of your prime, unless you're a goalkeeper, and then we get to use the excuse that you're a kid when you're 25, and then you can go on a bender or whatever. But so I look at Rabiot, and I think that you watch the highlights, you see him play. He seems to possess all the skills, that we seem to be sorely lacking in central midfield. But on the other hand, I think some very fundamental questions can be, and some pretty obvious questions and fair questions can be asked about whether or not he is to use an American sports term, a locker room cancer. He is someone whose diva-ish attitude, his weird relationship with his mother, who also seems to be very overbearing, and all of these things. Like, the question becomes, does his talent outweigh the potential baggage that you bring into the club? Especially, by the way, and this is the other thing that scares me about Rabiot, we are in a position where we have talked about the idea of not only lacking certain footballing traits in this squad, but lacking leadership. It's one thing to bring a player with a quote personality and an ego and an attitude or whatever into an established dressing room who has established leaders. We are a squad currently, and I feel like we've been saying this for a decade now, but we are a squad that is bereft of leadership. And we have seen that on display at the moments when it counts most. I don't know who the last, it's been a while since we've had it's not just even about the captain. It's about accountability and leadership throughout the squad. I mean, we've just been lacking that for the better part of a decade. And so I would feel better if Rabiot were a guy that you bring in who you are not relying upon. You are hoping to just simply take a flyer on him and he works out. But if he doesn't work out, we'll be okay. I don't know that we're in the position to do that. Maybe the question becomes, what does the cost of acquiring him, in terms of the total package look like? There's always that point at which it's the price is low enough that you're willing to take that risk, because if it doesn't work out, you haven't really lost anything. But when you've got a guy who has had, who's had documented issues at the clubs that he's been at in the past in terms of his, of not his skill per se, but his output, his, everything that comes along with him. Frankly, I'd feel better about this if we had a more solid dressing room and a more solid structure. And so, but again, I'll go back to the final. This is my final point. Look, we're Everton, and Everton right now are in a position that demands that you're going to take some risks on players, and some of those risks aren't going to work out. When you're in the Champions League, and it feels like a catch-22, doesn't it? Like if you're in the Champions League, you already have this magnet that attracts certain players of profiles that are inherently less risk in some ways. But when you're not, you have to take these risks. And what you have to hope is that you sign a Rabiot type and it just works out. And then you look smart. And then you're at another level. And so it's a tricky game. And I think that's where, signing him is filled with risk. But as you can see from his highlights, it's potentially filled with reward. So that becomes the question. Can this current structure with Carlo Ancelotti as manager, make him successful? There's a better chance of it happening with him, a manager that Rabiot, by all accounts, respects, than it would have been under Marco Silva. So I think that becomes the bigger question. So it's complicated for sure.
Yeah, I think I sort of look at him, Dave, as a player, and albeit he's had issues, and albeit he's not played much in recent years, because obviously when his contract was run down at PSG, he was sort of banished from the training ground. He didn't want him anywhere near them. At Juventus, he had his injury issues, struggled to get into their midfield. I think those players that are at just a precarious point in the career where it can go one way or another aren't really suited to Everton, like I was saying there. And I sort of look at him and go, if you dropped him into Liverpool's squad, you can guarantee that he'd kick on and he'd become a really good player. Because like Rob was saying, the conditions are there for players to go there and do well, because everything around them in regards to the manager, the characters in the dressing room, the system, the work ethic, it's all there. I mean, it's been a long time since they signed somebody and it's not worked out for them. And I think that's because of the culture and the leadership of the football club now. Whereas I don't know if we are there yet. And so to go what Rob was saying, this feels like a player that Everton could maybe look to sign in a couple of years when Carlo Ancelotti's got his feet under the desk a little bit more and got his ideas across and brought his own players in and maybe changed the staff and got some more, some bigger characters and some better leaders in the team. Right now, I'm not entirely sure I'd be looking to take a gamble on him.
The difficulty becomes, and I agree with everything you've said there. I agree that the risk factor in it. I agree in the sort of comparison with Liverpool and how undoubtedly he'd seamlessly slot into them. I mean, the example that I best use from them is Xherdan Shaqiri, who, for a fact, we were linked to them several times, weren't we? Yeah. If he was to come to us before he went to Liverpool when he left Stoke, I can bet my bottom dollar it would have been a catastrophe.
Flamed out completely.
Yeah,
Yes.
But for them, Klopp's got what he needed from him. Yes, all right, he's probably going to leave now, isn't he? But he got what he needed from him. He's been quite useful off the bench for them. Scored a couple of winners against Man United and things like that. He's able to keep that. Yeah, exactly. He's able to keep that motivation for those players. We don't have that environment, Matt. I think you're absolutely spot on. And that's not a criticism of the player per se. It's just whether those conditions are actually right for them to thrive. And it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. I think when Rob we were talking about players' development and where the onus is on the club to help them thrive. We don't have anywhere near that environment. I mean, you look at how someone like Calvert-Lewin's come to the fore. He's done that by basically sheer fight and determination off his own back to get to where he is now. I'm pretty sure Dominic Calvert-Lewin could have left Everton numerous times in the last couple of years, and he would have been well within his rights to have pushed for a move away from us, given how he was treated. And also, look, not many of us thought he was good for a while, you notwithstanding, Matt. But with someone like a Rabiot, I think you're spot on. I think you need an environment for him to sort of buy into. You need an environment where he's going to be able to bounce off other players, be able to be part of that structure. And I see him as somebody you buy at Everton who'd come in and be the superstar midfield player. He'd be one of our marquee signings, I hate the modern day parlance, but that's it, as we know. he'd have to come in and be that player. That to me, you are walking a tightrope with players like that. You're walking a tightrope with what you ask of them. You instantly want them to come in and be a hit with the fans and somebody who'll be a bit of a talisman for us. Now, I've just watched while you guys were talking there. I had one ear on you guys and one eye watching this. And he looks the exact type of player that we need. Don't get me wrong. I think he's very powerful midfield runner. He loves putting his foot in. He's got a real touch of class about him, and he can find the forward pass as well. That sounds like what we're crying out for. But again, there's so many other complicated pieces to that jigsaw, isn't there, that we know that you have to burden yourself with when you sign for us. And it annoys the hell out of me, the fact that we don't have that environment in place, because that should be one of the things that comes naturally to a football club like us when we're trying to kick on, when we've got the finances that we do have these days. The easy part should be integrating them into our side and being able to make them efficient players for us from the off. But for some reason, that does not happen naturally at Everton. And you do think with his short history, and like you say, Matt, various issues, whether they're his fault or not, and him not being able to settle at a club like Juventus does ring those same old alarm bells. So you're absolutely right. But then the other side of it is, who do you go for?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Dave, the fact that he's been at Juventus, who you would look at from the outside and say they have got the right leadership and the right setup. They've got a manager in Sarri who's got a lot of respect over there. They've got Cristiano Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo's there, who's somebody throughout his career who just sets the highest standards possible in training and on the pitch. You've got people like Buffon who come back into the squad, Chiellini, Bonucci. The list is endless there of the players they've got. And for one reason or another, after a few months of being there, it's already talk about him leaving. And whether, regardless of what's happened this season, it's clear his people are briefing and making nudges about him wanting to move on. So that's not encouraging.
And what's his motivation at Everton, Matt? What's his motivation at Everton?
Well, if you're looking at it favourably from our point of view, you could say to work under someone like Ancelotti, to play in the Premier League, to be guaranteed regular football, because even, like I said, at Juventus, albeit he's a talented lad, you've got people like Matuidi, Pjanic, Bentancur, Aaron Ramsey signed for them as well, didn't he, in the summer as well? He's a central midfielder. And Ray Chandler's there, albeit he's left now. So there is competition there. But again, I think the point Rob made is absolutely spot on in regards to if he played for Manchester United and Arsenal, and all of a sudden he was coming to Everton, you'd say, well, why are we getting cast-offs here? But because it's
Walcott again.
Yeah, because it's Juventus, and because it's Paris Saint-Germain, it's a bit different. But we've got a couple of minutes left, so I will ask you your weekly question. So the window this week, where I want you to name the players Everton signed, is 2005. So this is after that wonderful campaign where Everton finished 4th in the Premier League table, got into the Champions League, got knocked out of that, and then got knocked out the Europa League pretty quickly afterwards as well. In that summer, Everton signed 6 players. Sorry, they signed 5. They signed 5 players in that summer, and they got a short-term loan in the January. So 6 in total throughout the course of the campaign. In the summer, they signed 3 players from Serie A and 2 players from the Premier League. You can take turns of naming them. I will come to you first, Rob Vera.
One I'll just never forget, because this was the very first transfer window I ever tried to follow. And again, this was pre-Twitter. But Kruldrup came that summer. I know that.
Good.
Boy, what a disaster. I thought, wow, he's got a name I can barely pronounce. I bet he's awesome. And boy, and that's when I learned about the true heartbreak of this beautiful thing we call the transfer.
Yeah, joined for $5 million from Udinese and then was shipped to Fiorentina in January later that year for $3.6 million. Dave, you've got 5 left, 4 in the summer, 1 in January.
I will go for another summer acquisition. It was, I'm certain it was deadline day, and he'll always live in infamy. Andy van der Meijden.
Andy van der Meijden, yeah, from Inter Milan. Obviously didn't work out for him in the end. So
I was buzzing when we signed him.
Yeah, so was I.
Always remember the old celebration when he scored against clay pigeon shooting to go with the PC version.
Yeah.
I think this was January, if I remember correctly, but James Beattie was this time period, yes?
He was the January before, so he was January of 2005.
Okay. Damn it. Okay.
So I'll give you some clues. So the two...
Phil Neville.
Phil Neville's one. Yeah, Man United, 3.5 million.
Bargain.
Oh, gosh.
So we've got one midfielder from the Premier League, one defender who joined on a season-long loan from Italy, signed from Roma.
The only Italy one I can remember, and I don't know if I'm even in the right year, and I only remember this because the last name was Ferrari, wasn't it?
Yes,
wasn't it Matteo Ferrari?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I've got is curled up Ferrari, and I was wrong about Beattie, so I swore
and
Beattie
was really good.
God, yeah.
Matteo Ferrari was really good. I think he played like 7 games, didn't he?
Yeah, he was decent. So we've got one more permanent signing, Dave, and then one loan from January.
Was it Valente?
No.
You not signed Valente in that summer?
No, he was there the season after, I think.
Oh, I don't know. I think you need to check that. I'm pretty sure we signed Valente that summer.
Mikel? No, Arteta. It wasn't Arteta.
Arteta was the season before.
Yeah. Okay. Crap.
We signed him from Tottenham Hotspur. I'm basically telling you the answer there now.
Oh, I don't know.
Who was it? Defender?
Midfielder.
Andy Gardner.
No, midfielder.
Midfielder from Simon Davis.
Simon Davis.
Oh my God! I think that was the first time. Now that rings a bell. That was the first time I'd ever learned that you pronounced what I read as Davies, and it was Davis.
He wasn't Simon Davis.
Does anyone know the emergency loan signing in January?
We not get Alan Stubbs back?
No. Goalkeeper?
Espen Bardson?
No, from Portsmouth.
Oh, was it Westerveld?
Sander Westerveld, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
There you go.
Lovely guy, him, by the way. He's a really nice fella, him.
Nuno Valente was the summer after, so.
Oh, yeah. I like Nuno Valente for a little period of time.
Valente was a decent left back.
Bit of a dreamboat for a bit, wasn't he, as well? But
Nuno Valente was the last left back I remember before Leighton Baines for some reason.
Johnny and Lescott.
Well, yeah, yes, yeah, I know. I just never could think of him that way, even though I know that he did that for sure.
Wonderful. Lads, it's been a pleasure. That's been the transfer show for this week. We might have some more rumours to talk about next week, who knows, but interesting stuff. Nevertheless, from Dave and Rob. We'll have our weekly show out later this week as well. Me and Dave will continue our odyssey of a review of the 2012-13 season. We've done 2 parts, so we're not even in the new year yet, I don't think. So Mark Mosey's going to join us for that. Rob, kickabout this week.
Kickabout. I've got the old crew back of Les Roberts and Kate Riley James.
Yes.
So we'll be talking about a variety of things that I haven't totally figured out yet, but I will preview this one bit. I prompted them. I didn't say they had to, but I just said that I'm finishing watching it. The Last Dance documentary that just has been finishing up. It's such a fascinating watch.
3 episodes in.
Oh yeah, are you liking it so far? Even if you're not into basketball, is it interesting?
The footage of Jordan when he's younger is just unbelievable.
His suits are incredible.
His ability.
To watch him at that age when he's just that raw and dynamic, he is a freak of nature, isn't he?
Yeah, it's when you. And by the way, I will say this one thing about The Last Dance. It's granted the season structure is very different in some of our traditional American sports, where there's playoffs involved and all these other things. But watching the evolution of this team with this one great player having to, be defeated multiple times and overcome the same team and finally get over the hump and achieve true greatness is such an interesting case study. It is such that really is something that you can take with you through all sport. But it's a fascinating, and
Oh,
it's certainly interesting to look at a team like that before the social media and internet age that we live in now, because they would have never gotten away with the murder that they got away with some of the stuff going on behind the scenes. But yeah, no, fascinating watch for sure.
I am excited to see Les's assessment of Michael Jordan's suits, as Dave said there. I'm sure that'll be a great segment.
The 80s and 90s had those the big loose
big lapels
suits with the giant shoulders. I feel like everyone had really wide shoulders in those suits back then.
Wonderful stuff. Okay, yeah, that's it this week on Transfer Show. Look out for that kickabout on Thursday or Friday. It'll be out. Go and listen to last week as well if you haven't already. That was brilliant with Mike and Hannah. We'll speak to you again soon here on the Blue Room.